Alright, Mr. Claxon's algebra students, today I'm going to show you how to make a scatter plot by using Desmos. You had a question, this question was on page 251 of your text, where it asked you to make a scatter plot of the following data. The first thing that we are going to do here is take notion of the fact, or notice that we have height and weight. In this particular case, we really can't definitively say which should be the dependent and which should be the independent. So we're just going to go ahead and declare height the independent variable, and then weight would be the dependent variable. So looking at this, we're just going to use the fact that x is typically on the left side and y is typically on the right side. So when we go to graph our equation, or I'm sorry, our scatter plot, we are going to enter the data into a table in that way. So let's go ahead and get started with Desmos. I have this Desmos. I go to www.desmos.com. We're going to start graphing. I would like you to log in with your sign-in information. Sign in with Google, and there we go. So we can sign in with Google there. I've already started this graph, so I'm going to go ahead and go over here to Open Graph, and I'm going to open, let's see, we had number 10, which we were working on today. I have completed number 10 already. Just to see what we're dealing with here. When we entered in our height and our weight, not our height, but the height and weight that they gave us, we then had to go use the graph settings to declare where we wanted to look. Now, I always recommend to students that you should make these values right here based upon your domain or your x values that we've declared. So we know we run from 62 to 73. So you might be asking yourself, well, why did I go from negative 9.566? Well, in this case, I wanted to see where the data was. So I made it well left of this vertical axis just to kind of zoom out. And now I'm going to zoom in on that data. So I could very easily zoom in on that data. I don't want to make it from 62 all the way down to 73. So I don't want to make it from 62 to 73. You'll see why. If I make it from 62 to 73, then I can't see some of the points there, right? And you see how we have these toolbars that you can select, and just it doesn't really allow us to see all the data. So I always say go back in there. If it's 62, we'll go ahead and set it at why don't we set it at 55, and then it stops at 73. Let's go all the way up to 80 so we can really see that data. If you look at my y values, notice I put negative 4.18 as my minimum value. That's my minimum. So y needs to be greater than or equal to that, and y needs to be less than or equal to 205.726. In this case, I could have also ran it from about 100 to 200 as well. So I'm going to go back in and change this from 100 to 200, effectively zooming in without hitting the plus button. That's what's happening here. So from 100 to 200, and I can still see the data. The only reason I might want to zoom out is if I was looking at estimating what the y-intercept would be. So, we zoomed in on it here. I could zoom out again, and we could see kind of what the y-intercept is and use that to estimate in order to create an equation. So I could have done that to estimate. Probably should have done that before I changed things here. Again, I would need to see where it crosses, so I'm going to go ahead and make this like negative 5, and then I'll go ahead and make the y-axis, we'll say negative 5 as well. And you can see now, if I wanted to, I could trace that data, and you can see that that data is actually going to be really, really negative, right? What we're going to do now is we're going to select 2 points that are going to give us a good line of fit here. A good line of fit, a line that splits as much of this as possible, and we're going to pull that equation directly from the data. We're going to use these 2 points, and we're going to pull that directly from the data. So 62,115 and 73,166. So I would go back here, and in a separate video, we'll talk about, pulling these two data points, the ones that I've described, and then the other one would have been, I believe it was 73,166. Now, that's not always going to work out that it's going to be your first and last point. That will not always work that way, so please make sure that you do recognize the fact that it will not always be the case that we take our first and last point. So we're going to take those 2 points, and now I'm going to write an equation in slope-intercept form by first finding the slope and then the y-intercept. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. You can search for the other video if you want to see how to do that.